Lag BaOmer. So what we want to do today is discuss a little bit about the concept and the significance and the history of Lag BaOmer, and maybe we'll study a little bit of Hasidic insights about Lag BaOmer. So just for the history, what's Lag BaOmer? So we'll start with the name. Literally, the name Lag BaOmer, the word lag is not a real word. It's Lamed Gimel, which is 33. And I'm trying to mute everybody so we can. So Lag BaOmer is 33. It's the 33rd day of the Omer. What's the Omer? The Omer is the biblical commandment to count from Passover until the holiday of Shavuot, to count 7 weeks. And after the 7 weeks, the 50th day is the day of Shavuot, the holiday of weeks, which we celebrate the giving of the Torah on that day. The reason why it's called Omer is a measurement of grain, and the first day they would offer a offering of the new grain, and that was an Omer, a certain amount of the new grain. And after that, they were allowed to eat of the new grain. So in biblical Israel, the law is as follows. So if the grain grows, you cannot eat your own grain, your new grain, until one portion of the grain, a collective portion from all of the Jewish people, is offered in the temple. And after that day, everybody can eat their new grain. When there's no temple, you have to wait till the second day of Passover. So it's not really, you don't have to wait for the offering, but you have to wait for the day that the offering would have been offered. In any case, Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the counting. So the counting lasts 49 days. The 33rd day is Lag BaOmer. Lag, again, is Lamed Gimel, which is 33. So why do we celebrate Lag BaOmer? So historically, there are two reasons given. The first reason, the Talmud says as follows. There was the great sage Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and all of them died in a plague. That's what the Talmud says. Why did they die in a plague? So the Talmud says they did not have respect for each other. Lo nahagu kavod ze bazeh. They did not express respect for each other. That's why they all died. However, they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. So therefore, Lag BaOmer has become a day of celebration. That's one reason. Now you can get technical. What does it mean they stopped? Does it mean they did not die on Lag BaOmer and then went back to dying after Lag BaOmer? There are different opinions. So the law becomes that during the time of the counting of the Omer is considered a time of mourning. We don't play live music. We don't get married. And because to commemorate the plague. But however, on Lag BaOmer, the day of the 33rd of the Omer, that's a joyous day because the plague stopped or ceased. And like I said, there are different opinions. Some people say after Lag BaOmer we go back to mourning. Some people say they don't. It depends on the custom. Chabad custom is we do go back to mourning until Shavuot. But that's the idea. So that's the historic event. There were the students of Rabbi Akiva, did not honor each other. There was a plague. The plague stopped. We celebrate. That's one interpretation. Not one interpretation. That's one of the historic reasons for Lag BaOmer. Then there's a second historic reason. The second historic reason is that according to the tradition, that is the day of the passing of the great sage, the great Talmudic sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he is was a very great rabbi. Of course, I think he's mentioned in every single tractate of the entire Talmud. But he is also unique in the sense that he was the author of the Zohar, which is the greatest work of Jewish mysticism, and he taught a lot of the Jewish mystical knowledge, even though at that point he only taught it to a very small circle. And the point is that when he passed away on the Lag BaOmer, and the tradition is told, written in the Zohar, that the day of his passing he revealed great secrets of the Torah, and he just said that the day of his passing should be not a day of mourning, but a day of joy, and he called it a Hilula. Hilula today, now they call any day of the passing of the righteous, they call it a Hilula, but Hilula literally means a wedding day. He says the day of my passing, you should consider it as joyous as a wedding, which is very strange because up to that point, the day of a wedding, the day of a passing was obviously a sad day. So that's the tradition. And because it's his day of passing and he requested that it should be a joyous day, so the Jewish community, especially the ones connected to the Kabbalistic tradition, talking about Sephardic communities, they had a custom going back hundreds of years to make this day a great celebration. And every year, if you go to the north of Israel, Meron, which is the little town where he's buried, it's a little town, really, really small, one main street, and there's about 250,000 people come there for Lag BaOmer, except for this year because of Corona. I've been there quite a few times, I think 3 times, and it's certainly a sight to behold. So those are the 2 historic reasons. The Hasidic movement comes and says that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Lag BaOmer is not just a day of his passing, and he said we should be joyous, but there's more to it because the fact that he revealed all those secrets of the Torah is an important stage of the revelation of the Kabbalistic and the mystical knowledge. So we're celebrating the sort of spiritual breakthrough that allows for the mystical knowledge to be revealed. The mystical knowledge was revealed in stages, and a very important stage is the life of Rabbi Shimon, but even more so the day of his passing, which on that day he revealed teachings that he has not revealed up to that point. So I think these are the 2 main reasons, and now we want to elaborate upon each of them and see what the significance is to us. But these are the historic reasons. If anybody wants to comment and make a comment, I feel bad that I'm the only one talking. So if anybody wants to comment and ask a question about the history, now is the time. Otherwise, we move forward and talk about the meaning and the inner significance. Okay, sounds good. Okay, just to add, when we were kids, the custom has become that we go out to nature. So we didn't go to school. We went to the parks. And when I was growing up on Sunday, if Lag BaOmer was on Sunday, they would close down the Eastern Parkway, which is the big street in Crown Heights. And they had a big Jewish children. And it was a very exciting day in our life. So it's a nice holiday. Okay, now we have to move on to say, okay, so what's the relevance to us? What do we learn from here? And what is the significance and the spiritual significance? And that's where we're headed right now. Okay, so we'll start with Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva was a little bit before, was the teacher of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So we'll start with Rabbi Akiva. So when you think about this piece of Talmud, there were 24,000 students. They all died because they did not have respect one to another, which is very strange because you would assume the students of Rabbi Akiva who were Torah scholars would have basic decency. They would be a mensch. They would treat people with respect. So why is it that specifically these great sages sort of committed this sin of not having respect to each other? That's one question. Another question, and the Rebbe always asked this question and highlighted this question, is that it's very strange because Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest sages in Judaism. The Talmud says that all of the oral Torah that we have, we get from the students of Rabbi Akiva, and they all are based according to the teachings of Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva is a critical link in the chain that we have from the Talmud to Sinai. But even though Rabbi Akiva is this great sage, but the most famous and the most general teaching of Rabbi Akiva is, you must have heard this, is that the verse says, that we studied it was 2 weeks ago, the verse says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. And Rabbi Akiva says, and it's brought down in Rashi, but Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is a great principle of the Torah. So here you have Rabbi Akiva, who's the teacher, and his sort of mission statement is that loving your fellow as yourself is a great principle of the Torah. That's like his main teaching, and not his main, that's the one he highlighted most often. Now, specifically his students who claim to be his students, seeing that they could not get his most important teaching straight. They could not love their fellow as themselves. So how is it that of all the sages we know, that the ones who succumb to this sin of not honoring each other and not treating each other with respect is specifically the students of Rabbi Akiva, who himself highlighted the importance of love your fellow as yourself? So that is an interesting question, and this leads us to a whole new avenue of thinking about love. And we'll spend a few minutes on this, and then we move to Rabbi Shimon. So, what did the Rebbe explain? The Rebbe explained as follows: that the fact that they did not honor each other is not because they didn't love each other. To the contrary, because they loved each other, therefore they didn't honor each other. Sounds strange. Listen, I'll say it again. It's not that you didn't hear because it's too early in the morning. I did say something strange. I said that because they loved each other, therefore they did not honor each other. What does that mean? It means that students of Rabbi Akiva, so suppose we're both students of Rabbi Akiva, and I love you and you love me, yet we understand, we have a difference of opinion in how to understand the Torah, or how to understand the teachings of our teacher. Now, if I don't love you, then I really don't care about you. I really don't care if you make a mistake. It really doesn't bother me. So you're going off the path. I don't care. If I love you and I really care about you, then I want you to be on the right path. So now I tell you, hey, you're making a mistake. You're living the wrong lifestyle. You have to be more like me because I love you so much. And that actually was the cause for the lack of respect. And this is the brilliance of the words of the Talmud. It doesn't say they did not love each other. No, they loved each other. But the love did not allow for respect. What is respect? Respect is to see that even though I may see things different than you, I still respect the fact that you're different and you have a different perspective and you may be right. So this brings us to a whole discussion of the nature of love. And the nature of love, as we discussed many times, the nature of love is to feel one with the other person. But the problem with love is that sometimes I want to feel one with you, so I suffocate you, and I want you to be just like me because I love you. And I want you to understand the Torah just like I understand the Torah. And I want you to understand the teachings just like I understand the teachings. And if you don't, then I can't respect you because I love you so much, and I don't want you to make a mistake. And this is the great teaching, the great lesson of BaOmer, that it's not enough to love, but a person also has to have respect. And respect is respect the differences, respect the fact that people could be different than you, and there are other perspectives that are legitimate, and the love should not take away from respect. So the balancing of love and respect is true when we talk about fellow students. It's true when we talk about fellow human beings, but it's true in any relationship, especially the relationships where people are closer to you and you love them. You have to make sure that you have not just love but respect, because the more you love, the harder it is to respect. I love my children, but I don't always respect the fact that they're a little bit different than me. To get the balance right of love and respect is the message of BaOmer. So that's for the first point of Rabbi Akiva. And now we're going to spend a few minutes on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the master of the esoteric part of the Torah.
And
if somebody wants to jump in, now is the time.
When usually you teach, one of the main aspects in Judaism is that it's open for debate, and there are many interpretations for every. Why this particular group of people, they were trying to impose their own view and lacking the respect.
So it's hard to hear a little bit, but I think what you're saying is why usually in Judaism we like the idea of debate, and we like the idea of differences of opinion. So why is it that this particular group of people could not tolerate debate and differences of opinion? And the short answer is because they loved each other so much, right? If I don't feel connected with you, if I feel, okay, you're a nice guy, I'm a nice guy, you could live your path, I could live my path, I'm not offended by the differences. But what happens if there's someone who's very close to you, you really love them, you really care for them, you really feel like you're one, and all of a sudden they start doing something very different than the way you understand, right? So a stranger, I can tolerate differences of opinion with a stranger, but what happens if someone's very close to me? A parent, a spouse, a child, a close friend. Now, to tolerate differences of opinion when you feel the love so strongly, that's much harder. So the point is, specifically because they were the students of Rabbi Akiva, who taught love your fellow as yourself, because of that, that is specifically why they were the people who could not get this balance straight. Because the more the love, the harder it is to respect. And the challenge is not to squash the love, but to be able to cultivate both the love and the respect. As the Zohar says, and again, we're going to mention the Zohar because it's the passing of Rabbi Shimon. I mentioned this many times before, but the Zohar says that the love and respect are the two wings of any healthy relationship, right? You can't have a relationship just with love or just with respect. You need to have a little bit of both. You need to have both And just like the bird needs two wings to be able to fly, so too a relationship, which is a spiritual feeling, needs to have both the love and respect to be able to survive and thrive.
Rabbi?
Yes.
What you're describing as love really strikes me as self-love.
Correct. And the critique of love is that in some sense, all love is self-love. I know this sounds horrible, but in some sense, all love is self-love. The Talmud says, "Kol ahava," not the Talmud. The Jewish thinkers say, "Kol ahava chozeret el ha'ohev." Hebrew for any love returns to the lover. So what it means is, why do I love? No matter what, the answer has to circle back to myself. I love you because you make me feel so good. I love you is because you're whatever the answer is, and I like that. So ultimately, all love comes back to self. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Love is very important emotion. It's a very important emotion when we connect to God. You have to love God. It's a mitzvah. But there is a problem when any relationship is built solely on love. And the problem really is the fact that, like you say, it's ultimately, in some sense, worshiping self. If I respect you, and that's when I'm going beyond myself. That's when I say, I don't really see the world the way you do. I don't see the situation the way you do. But out of respect for you, I will either respect with you or go along with you, or at least have that emotion of respect. So deeply, respect is actually allows me to go beyond myself more than love.
I think Rabbi, respect is more important. In other words, I can love you because I respect the way you treat other people. I love you because you fed the animal. In other words, one form of love is I love you because you love me. The other is I love you because I respect the way you treat other people.
Correct. But again, let's take that example. Let's take the example. I love you because the way you treat animals. Okay. And I love animals. Right? So ultimately, it circles back to myself. If I don't care about animals, then I'm not going to respect the way you treat for animals. Everything has to circle back to self. And I can't resist. I'm going to say my old joke. I have to say it because I can't resist. I think it's my second favorite joke. My second favorite joke is the guy goes into the fish restaurant and the waiter says, "What do you want to eat?" So he says, "I love fish. Can you get me some fish?" So the waiter says, "Nah, you don't love fish. If you love the fish would be in the sea. You love yourself. You love the way the fish makes you feel, so you want to eat fish. But ultimately, you love yourself." So that's the truth. That's a very important topic. We can analyze this. Not to say love is bad. A relationship without love will not take off, just like a relationship without respect won't take off. So you need both wings, but it is a balance. And I would say, I think it's true that the more you love someone, the harder it is to respect. But that's not to say it's not important. It's the more it's important as well. But that is a very important topic and general topic, and we can discuss this any day of the week because it's very relevant. It's also, of course, relevant to today. BaOmer, the students of Rabbi Akiva taught love, but the problem was that the students took it too far, and they didn't realize that love is not in place of respect. Love is hopefully supposed to lead to respect as well. Okay, let's move to Rabbi Shimon. So
Rabbi, if can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Is it possible that Rabbi Akiva reached his decision that loving your neighbor as yourself is the most reaction to it?
We're losing you. Can you repeat? Is it possible that Rabbi Akiva
decided that loving your neighbor as yourself was the most important commandment after all of his students died?
It is possible. It is possible, but I don't know. I have to do the research. I suppose it was there before because that's why, like I said, this was a question the Rebbe asked about how is it possible that his students didn't take that passage to heart. So from that, I infer that he said that earlier, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to have to look at the sources.
Okay.
Okay, so the play continues. 24,000 people are wiped out. And most people, after imagine you built an academy and you had 24,000 students, and then and then everybody dies. But Rabbi Akiva is someone who's going to start up again. So he collects 5 students and he teaches those students, and those 5 students are the ones who actually in some sense, save the Torah and pass it on to the next generation. There was terrible persecution. There was Roman persecution. And these students, Rabbi Akiva himself was killed by the Romans for teaching Torah. And that is an important part of history and tragic time as well. So one of those 5 students is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai. Rabbi Shimon is a person who, like I said, becomes a great Talmudic scholar. I think he is mentioned in each of the tractates of the Talmud. I think he's the only sage mentioned in each of the tractates of the Talmud. And like I said, the tradition is that he was the one who authored the Zohar, and he is also delves in the mystical part of Torah. So let's think about this a little bit. What is mysticism, and how does this play out in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, and how does it change? How does it affect the way he looks at the world? So what we're going to try to do here for a few minutes. It's early in the morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, but in Corona, this is considered early. It's in the morning, so I'm going to just try to do this in a way. I'm going to try to do this briefly, but what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to sample 2 or 3 disagreements of Rabbi Shimon and his colleague, and see how Rabbi Shimon consistently is always taking the more mystical approach. And that's how we'll define mysticism, using by example, right? Instead of telling you, we're going to show you how it's done in the teachings of Rabbi Shimon, and then we'll show another additional point how the mysticism affects the real world. Okay, so let's think about this for a moment. So let's bring a few examples. The best example is politics, because everybody loves politics. So it's always good to talk about politics. So once upon a time, it's not just today that when you come to the Torah class, everybody starts talking about other matters. In the study hall, in the times of the Mishnah, the same story. They came to learn, but they could not resist talking about the politics of the time. What was the politics of the time? The politics of the time was, what about the Romans? Do you think the Romans are good, bad, or ugly, or are you indifferent? So the Romans, they destroyed the temple. They massacred many Jews. But in the period after the destruction of the temple, they also rebuilt Israel. So they built bridges, they built marketplaces, they rebuild the economy, right? That's what America does as well. When they conquer a land, they come destroy it, then they come with a Marshall Plan and rebuild it. The famous joke is that the economy in Israel was going bad. In the 80s, inflation was off the charts, and they didn't know what to do. So one minister suggests maybe we declare war on the United States, and then the United States will be victorious, and then they'll conquer Israel, and then they'll rebuild Israel, and everything will be wonderful. And they had almost everybody agreed to the plan, except that there was one minister that raised his hand and said, yeah, but what are we going to do if we win the war? So that's why that plan was shelved. But in any case, that's what the Romans did. And the Romans came and they rebuilt Israel. So the question becomes, do we like the Romans? And here you have 3 people. One person says, I don't like the Romans. The other person says, he's quiet, he was smart enough not to talk. He realized that is the Patriot Act and the NSA is listening and you shouldn't speak against the government, and that's what he did. And finally, Rabbi Shimon lashed out and he said he doesn't like the Romans. So I'm trying to find the English translation here and then I'll read it. Okay, here it is. So this is from the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, page 33b. Here we go. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon were sitting. And Yehuda, the son of proselytes, was sitting with them. So they're sitting and they're discussing current events. Rabbi Yehuda commenced by observing, how fine are the works of this people, referring to the Romans. Imagine the Romans were destroyed the temple, and Rabbi Yehuda sits and praises them. How fine are these people, the Romans? They have made marketplaces, they have built bridges, and they erected bathhouses. So they brought modern architecture, modern building, modern construction to the land of Israel. Wonderful. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi was silent, too smart to speak against the government. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai answered and said, all that they made for themselves. They built marketplaces to set harlots in them, baths to rejuvenate themselves, and bridges to levy tolls. Okay? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, don't get so excited. Indeed, they rebuilt Israel. but they rebuilt Israel. What is the purpose? The purpose that they did it, if you look at their intention is not because they're great lovers of Israel. Their intention is for themselves. And that's why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says he's not impressed. The story continues, and the Romans heard about it. The person who praised them, Rabbi Yehuda, they appointed the head of the school. Rabbi Yossi, they exiled to the north. And Rabbi Shimon, they wanted to kill. And Rabbi Shimon had to flee the Romans. And he was in a cave for 12 years. And then another year, we'll get to that story later, maybe, perhaps. So that's the discussion. The discussion is Rabbi Shimon looks at a situation. He doesn't like the Romans. Rabbi Yehuda says how beautiful the acts of the Romans are. How beautiful are the acts of the Romans. What are they really arguing about? What's at the heart of their arguments? So why is the mystic against the Romans? And why is Rabbi Yehuda pro-Roman? Okay, so to understand that, we have to introduce one more disagreement. You can find many, many examples, but this is just one, an easy one. And once we explain this, everything will be understood. So I'm going to jump to a different topic. This feels like a yeshiva. I'm jumping from topic to topic, but that's the way it goes. Here's the big question. Let's talk about the laws of Shabbat. Shabbat, you're not allowed to work. What aren't you allowed to do? If you study the tractate Shabbat, there are 39 categories of labor that you're not allowed to do on Shabbat. Okay, one of the things you're not allowed to do on Shabbat is you're not allowed to plow. Plowing is a critical part of preparing the earth to seed, to plant, and to grow. So one may not plow. That is the law. Now the question becomes, is an interesting question. What happens if I'm sitting in my front yard, or my backyard for that matter, and I want to sit in the sun, but my bench is on one side of the backyard and the sun is on the other side of the yard. So I grab my bench, it's a heavy bench, and I schlep it from one side to the other side. Seems like innocent enough. Yet while I did that, because the bench is so heavy, I actually plowed the earth in the process. So was that a violation? Do I have to go bring a sin offering in the temple? Okay, so in other words, the language of the Talmud is davar she'eino mitkaven. I did something without intention. So let me read the disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the same two characters. Rabbi Yehuda is the guy who praises the Romans. Rabbi Shimon is the one who does not praise the Romans, who says that they're selfish and they do it for their own intention, and we should not praise them because their intention of building Israel was not out of the love of Israel. So here we go. Rabbi Judah says, no articles may be dragged along the ground except a wagon, because it only presses the earth down. Rabbi Shimon says, a man may drag along a bed, stool, or bench across the ground, provided he has no intention of making a furrow. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're riding a wagon on the earth, that's not a problem, you're not plowing. But if you schlep an article, you're going to be plowing. Rabbi Shimon says you can schlep an article, you can schlep a table, schlep a bench, provided that you don't have an intention to plow. And the Talmud explains, Rabbi Yehuda maintains that an unintentional act is forbidden. Rabbi Shimon holds that an unintentional act is permitted. What's the logic here? What's happening here? So here you have in both these cases, we can bring many other cases, but we'll suffice with these two because it's the beautiful day, and on BaOmer you're supposed to go out to the field, so we don't have all day. But what's happening here is as follows. Rabbi Yehuda is looking at the practical side. The practical side is I'm not interested in intention. The Romans are building the land of Israel. I praise them. This guy is plowing his backyard. He has no intention to plow the backyard. All he's trying to do is innocently move the bench from point A to point B. But intention is not interesting for Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, tell me about action. Don't talk to me about intention. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, Rabbi Shimon says, I am interested in intention. I'm not interested in action. And that's why when he has to evaluate the Romans, he doesn't care if they build bridges or not. He wants to know, why did you build a bridge? If the purpose of the building of the bridge is so you can tax the people crossing the bridge, then it's for your own intention. You're not deserving of praise. So what do we see here? Rabbi Shimon the mystic looking not at action, but at intention. Same thing with Shabbat. Shabbat is, Rabbi Shimon says, it's not important. And God says rest on Shabbat. The action is less important. What's more important is the intention. And it's not considered work unless you have an intention to plow. And this is where you see the practical applications of the mystic. The mystic is interested in the intention. There are many other examples for this. A very interesting example. Okay, many other examples for this, but for right this moment, we'll keep it at these two, and then maybe we'll continue with one more point about Lag BaOmer, connecting it to the day. You know what? I can't resist. Give me another 2-3 minutes. I'll do one more point on the same theme, and then we'll move to another theme. So what's the last point? Everybody knows. Most people have heard of this law. The law is that if people come to a group of Jews and say, "Give us one Jew, and we will kill him. If you don't give us one Jew, we're going to kill everybody." So let's say there's a group of 10 people. People come and say, "Give us one, and we'll kill him. If not, we'll kill all 10." So what's the law? May you sacrifice one to save the many? And the simple answer is you may not. It gets a little bit more complicated when it's not just any person, but what happens if the people, the bad guys, they come and they specify a specific person, right? So it's not that they say, "Give us one person," and then it's up to us to decide who will live and who to die, who shall live and who shall die, and we're reluctant to make a decision. But it's a more specific case. How about if it's a case, if they come and they say, "Give us Yankel, and if you give us Yankel, we'll kill Yankel. If you don't give us Yankel, we're going to kill everybody." Now there's so much. I'm sorry?
Why me? I'm Yankel.
You're Yankel. Oh.
Yankelevich.
Yankel is the classic name of a Jew because we're the sons of Yaakov. So I say a Jew, I say Yankel. Happens to be that's your name. So you're lucky. But Yankel is a Jew, is Yankel. What's a Jew? A Jew is Yankel. Yankel is the Yiddish rendition of the name Jacob. That's what Yankel is. And Jacob is our patriarch. Okay.
Rabbi, so isn't this one of the reasons why during the Holocaust there was so much turmoil about?
Correct. Unfortunately, this doesn't stay. This is not just in the realm of theoretical law, but throughout history, this case came up many, many times, unfortunately. But let's continue on our journey of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So we have a case where if they single out the person, long story short, Rabbi Yehuda says if they single out the person, you can give him that person. Rabbi Shimon says you may. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, Rabbi Yehuda says if they single out a person, you can give him the person. Rabbi Shimon says you cannot. Even if they single out a specific person, you may not sacrifice one to save many. So Rabbi Shimon has taken this point to an extreme. Under no circumstances will he allow for the sacrificing one to save many. Now, why would you not sacrifice one to save many? If you're a practical person, you will always have to say it's better to have one person dead than 10 people dead, right? But Rabbi Shimon resists that approach. Why? Because Rabbi Shimon is a mystic. And from the perspective of the mystic, if you look at the soul, then the value of human life can't be measured. And the value of every human life is infinite. And therefore, 1 infinity and 10 infinities equals the same. Now, it's very hard for us to accept it because we're not looking for the mystical perspective. But it's no surprise that the person who takes this opinion to the extreme is Rabbi Shimon, who is the great mystic, and he's looking for the mystical perspective. And the mystical perspective says every human life is infinite. And once you get into the realm of infinity, 1 is not 10 infinity is not more than 1 infinity. All those categories fall down when you talk about infinity. So that's the second point. What we try to do is portray a little bit of Rabbi Shimon of how being a mystic is not just somebody who's sitting in a cave and thinking about spiritual worlds, but it actually affects the real world scenarios, and it affects his ruling, his halachic ruling. Because the Jewish mystic is not one separated from human life, but he's invested in human life. But that perspective of mysticism affects how he or she is going to react and act in this physical world. So we can elaborate upon this theme, but that's for now. So far, the 2 points that we made is we discussed the idea of the students of Rabbi Akiva. We discussed the importance of the balance between love and respect. And then we discussed the concept of Rabbi Shimon. We tried to track a little bit of his teachings in the realm of the legal realm of the Torah. First of all, his approach to politics, his approach to the laws of Shabbat, and his approach to evaluating life And all three, Rabbi Shimon consistently takes the perspective that's more spiritual. He's interested in intention. He's less interested in action. In other words, action, if it's action, it has no intention, it's not as meaningful to Rabbi Shimon. And when it comes to evaluating human life, he takes the extreme mystical perspective, whereas he refuses to look at the human life from any practical considerations. He's not utilitarian when it comes to human life, but he's looking at the value of every human life as infinite. So that is for the second point, and we'll open it up if anybody has a question or two. And if not, if we have a few minutes, with your permission, we'll go to one more Kabbalistic point about the day of Lag BaOmer.
Okay. Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay. When you talked about love being among the students at the beginning, I don't even see that as love if the identity includes thinking only as I do. So I'm going to go back to that category of intention. What was the intention of that love? Was that love as I love you just because you see I do?
Okay, let me explain what I mean love. Love, I mean, I feel. How do you define love? There are different ways to define love. The easy way to define love is, not the easy way, one way to define love is, I want to feel one with you. And that's what love is. I want to feel close to you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And therefore, if I'm in love with you, it's very hard for me to tolerate, not to tolerate, it's very hard for me to feel in love. Meanwhile, when we have things that are glaring, that are so different. And the more something is meaningful for me, the harder it is for me to accept that you're different than me on this point. That's why.
I guess, Rabbi, that's the definition of love. Then you're giving it a different definition.
Yes.
Connection
Yes.
of love is not. I didn't understand it as that. Okay.
Yeah, my definition of love is I want to feel one with you, both physically and spiritually and psychologically and emotionally. And then therefore, if I love you so much and and something that's very close to my heart, you see very different, you don't feel the way I do, it's frustrating.
Yeah, but Rabbi, that's I want that because it makes me feel better. It goes back to why did the Romans build the markets?
Agreed. Love is
about my building my market in you.
Agreed. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Without love, there would be no relationships. I love God. Why do I love God? So King David says, love of God, being close to God is good for me. Nothing wrong with that.
It's better today. He's talking about, he's talking about.
Oh, okay. So what's happening here is like this. What's happening here is, make no mistake. Make no mistake. When I say love is comes back to the lover, it's not a bad thing. It's reality. That's the way it is. It's not good or bad. That's the way it is. Now, love is a very spiritual thing, because if I want to be one with you as opposed to just being one with me, that is a spiritual thing. That means I'm connecting to someone outside myself. But it is, I love you because of how it makes me feel. Nothing wrong with that. That's a wonderful thing. The point is, if you have only love, then it's a problem because there's no respect. Now, some people are chatting up. I promise I'm on my phone, so it's hard for me to see everything. But I see Roberta wants to know if people, if it's celebrated amongst non-Orthodox Jewish communities. The short answer is probably not. It's mostly celebrated within the Sephardic communities. So if you have Sephardic communities, even if they're not Orthodox, their Sephardic communities were celebrated because, again, the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was celebrated in the Sephardic communities more than the Ashkenazi communities. So the answer is, for the Sephardic communities, it's celebrated. Ashkenazi communities, it's mainly Orthodox, and it's mainly celebrated. Like I said, there's the law of that you have to be in a period of mourning, at least until Lag BaOmer. And then there's the mystical side, which is the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Zohar and inner parts of the Torah. Okay. So where are we at? We're at 10:41. I have 4 minutes. 4 minutes before we go overtime. Okay. So let's talk about the day Lag BaOmer. And we want to talk from the mystical perspective. And the Kabbalah teaches that everything in Torah is precise, and everything has to be alluded to in the written Torah. So if you want to look at the word Lag BaOmer, we want to look at the Bible to see where is the words Lag BaOmer, where's the words Lag alluded to in the Torah. And the words Lag itself, Lamed Gimel, does not appear in the Torah, but those two letters that comprise Lag, Lamed Gimel, do appear in the Torah. It appears twice. And if you switch Lag and you switch the order, you have not Lag, but Gal. You have Gal. And Gal means two things, two separate things, but of course they look very different. But of course, if you look from the mystical perspective, they're interrelated. So there are two verses in the Torah. Both are connected, according to the mystics, both are connected to Lag BaOmer. One has a more obvious connection, and the other connection is less obvious. So let's start with the obvious connection. There is a verse in the book of Psalms where King David says, Gal einai ve'abita, open my eyes. The word gal is to reveal. Reveal my eyes. Open my eyes and I will see the wonders of your Torah. What does it mean? Open up my eyes and I will see the wonders of your Torah. So the wonders of the Torah means the secrets within the Torah. So King David is saying, I know I can go to the bookstore and buy a set of Talmud. I'm only joking. There's no Talmud in the times of David. But I know I can read the Torah and see the simple meaning. In other words, the straightforward meaning, this I'm allowed to do, this I'm not allowed to do. But the mystical meaning is concealed. So King David says, Gal einai, open my eyes, reveal my eyes, and help me understand the wonders of the Torah, meaning the secrets of the Torah, the mystical dimension of the Torah. Okay? No surprise then that when is the day that commemorates, that celebrates the beginning of the process of revealing the mysteries of the Torah, is that same day. Gal. Gal is Lag. So in the verse where King David asks to reveal the mysteries of the Torah, the day of Lag BaOmer is alluded to in that verse. That's one point. And that's one place where Lag BaOmer is alluded to in the written Torah. But that's in Tehillim and Psalms. Where do you have the word Lag alluded to in the 5 books of Moses? And this is actually, it doesn't seem as obvious, but it is very much connected. So again, we're looking not for Lag because Lag doesn't appear. We're looking for Gal. We take those two letters, Lam and Gimel, we switch the order and we have Gal. And Gal in this case, in the written Torah, appears in the form of Gal means a little mound, a small little mountain of stones. And if you look at the book of Genesis, it appears in the following context. Jacob is escaping his father-in-law, Lavan. And Jacob escapes. He takes his 2 daughters and his other 2 wives and his children and the sheep, and he escapes to Israel. Lavan, he's afraid that his father-in-law, Lavan, will not let him go. Lavan, in turn, chases Jacob, and they meet up at this place, and God appears to Lavan in a dream and says, leave the guy alone. And then they confront each other. And basically 20 years of tension gets spilled out in that one conversation. So it's a very heavy conversation. Lavan says, well, you're stealing my daughters and you're taking everything and you're escaping. And Jacob unloads all his resentment for the past 20 years where his father-in-law took advantage of it. So like usually the fights happen because we don't talk. They each spill their resentments. They each speak it out. And now they like each other. Now, it doesn't mean they like each other. It means they don't hate each other. But like they say, good fences make good neighbors. They say we're going to separate. Jacob is heading back to Israel, and Lavan is going back to Aram, which is downtown Baghdad, going back to Iraq. So they make a little mound, and the mound is a symbol of a border. And the verse says they make Eid Hagal Hazeh. This mound would testify that we're making peace, and peace in the context is different forms of peace. One form of peace is I love you. The other form of peace is I'm not going to kill you. So that's what he says. This mound will be a sign that each of us would not cross the mound to harm the other. So that's the mound. The mound is a symbol of separation. Now Rashi right away says, why do they have to add? The lawyers are always putting in the small print. So the verse says each one says, I won't pass this mound to do bad. Why do you have to say to do bad? Say, I won't pass this mound. So the answer is they're allowed to pass the mound to do good, to do business, to say hello, to come for Thanksgiving. They're allowed to pass the mound for some reasons. They're just not allowed to pass the mound for evil. So here we have something interesting. That's why it's not a wall, it's a mound. Mound represents a small barrier. It's a barrier, but in some sense it may be crossed. It may be crossed under certain circumstances. So says the Kabbalah, this day of Lag BaOmer is alluded to in this little mound. Same word, Gal, Lag, same letters. What do we see about the mystical wisdom of the Kabbalah? On one hand, we see that there is a barrier. That it was supposed to remain hidden. And especially in the earlier generations, it was supposed to be hidden. There's supposed to be a separation between the practical and the mystical. And the mystical was not supposed to be taught to people under 40, and it certainly was not supposed to be taught to people who are not necessarily worthy and well-versed in the other parts of Torah. There's supposed to be a division. And even amongst the great scholars in the times of Rabbi Shimon, only a very small percentage of the scholars were involved in the mystical knowledge of Kabbalah. So we have here a mound, a separation. Yet what does Lag BaOmer represent? It represents, despite the fact that there is a built-in separation, there's a separation between heaven and earth, the mound is supposed to be crossed. You have to be careful. You're crossing it in a positive way, not to do evil. It's going to be constructive, not destructive, all good and fine. However, the point is, this is not an absolute barrier. This is a mound that you're supposed to overcome. And therefore, Lag BaOmer is alluded to in that day in the mound, meaning to say, despite the fact there's a mound, the mound should be breached. The mound should be, we should overcome the mound, and we should bridge both the heaven and the earth, the mystical part of Torah and the revealed part of Torah. And eventually, when we do that, we connect heaven and earth and we see the divine power in the physical world around us. And the way you do so is by studying the mystical part of Torah. So this is in short. There's so much to say about Lag BaOmer. This is in short. If you want to just summarize the 3 points, we discussed the idea of the students of Rabbi Akiva teach us the importance of balancing love and respect. Respect is not enough. Love is not enough. You need the balance of the two. And it's much harder. The more you love somebody, the more I want to feel one with you, the harder it is for me to tolerate differences. But that doesn't mean it's less important. To the contrary, it's more important. That's point number 1. Point number 2, we trace the way Rabbi Shimon's teachings express themselves, and his mystical perspective expresses himself in the way he taught the law. In other words, the mysticism was not just abstract. It affected the way he studied Torah. And the third point is we show how the day of Lag BaOmer is alluded to in the 5 books of Moses, and that is, there is a mound, there is a separation between Jacob and Lavan, but the mound is supposed to, ultimately, the mound is supposed to be overcome for positive reasons. This is sort of a metaphor for what Lag BaOmer is doing, despite the fact that there is a bridge between the practical part of Torah and the physical world and the spiritual part of Torah and the esoteric part of Torah. There is a mound, there is a separation, but ultimately, Lag BaOmer tells us that the mound is not a barrier. In other words, it's just a symbolic barrier. It's not an absolute barrier, and ultimately, it's supposed to be overcome. And that's what we do. And this leads us to ultimately the revelation of the mystical knowledge, which will culminate in times of the Mashiach, when we will all see holiness wherever we look. So this is the story in short. Thank you for joining. Thank you for enhancing my Lag BaOmer. I'm going to open it up if anybody wants to comment. And everybody have a wonderful day. Oh, for 1 second. One note of programming, we have to promote tomorrow's class. Tomorrow's class I'm very excited about, because we're going to start a new trend, we're going to start something new, and it was encouraged by Neil, so thank you, Neil. We're going to do a few classes on the book of Ruth, because there are many communities, not the Chabad community, many communities study the book of Ruth before on Shavuot. We're going to lead up to Shavuot. We're going to do a few classes. I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe we'll continue after Shavuot. We'll see the pace. But tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, and I hope next week.
I showed you what the professor said yesterday.
Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, we're going to study the book of Ruth, and I hope to continue on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, etc. So that's for that. If anybody wants to ask a question, if you can hear yourself, go ahead.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
That's what I said, is see the baseball. And then
What is it with bonfires and
What is it with bonfires? Good question. Participants. Let me see if I can mute everything.
And then he says, you don't have to butter me up about the Tigers, Daniel. You got your egg. I know how.
Okay, so what is it about bonfires? That is an excellent question. And of course, the answer is it depends who you ask.